Hey. Last week we talked about the three travelers getting ready to leave Abraham's tent. Two went towards Sodom, and the third, who we have established is Jesus Christ, stopped, and he talked with Abraham some more, and he decided that he was going to share with Abraham his plans to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because of all of their immorality and their sin that was going on. Actually, there was 5 cities that's going to get destroyed: Sodom and Gomorrah, and then there's the other 3 in the plains there. So because of their sin, God's going to destroy them. And we talked about the cries of the sinful, and something that Christ said to Abraham, because their cries are great. And we talked about the fact that He hears all prayers. He hears all cries, not just from the righteous. He hears them from the sinful too. But He just treats. We have communication back and forth with God, and people who are not saved do not. We talked about the Lord and the fact that He went down into Sodom to examine it, and we talked about the Tower of Babel, about how He did the same thing in that time. And it wasn't because He can't see from heaven. It's not that He can't hear from heaven. It's not because He doesn't know what's going on. He did that in both counts, inspecting the Tower of Babel, and He's going into the city of Sodom to show that He's a righteous judge. He doesn't just condemn you because of something that somebody told him, just because of some kind of evidence or whatever. He is going down there to witness it firsthand, so that you know that He's condemning you for the truth. We talked about that too, and that you can fool all of us, but you can't fool yourself, and you can't fool God. Both of you know what the truth is. So He does that so that you know that He's a righteous God. We know that the circumstantial, he doesn't send people to hell also for circumstantial evidence. It's concrete. You have sinned. And now we're going to pick things back up here this morning with verse 23. This is coming towards the end of chapter 18. And it says, "And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" Now in those 3 verses, there's some very powerful things that we should stop and look at, because Abraham, if you're really not understanding the relationship between Abraham and God, you would imagine that Abraham is challenging God here. He's like, well, you could, if you're not really understanding what's going on, you could basically turn that into, hey, wait a minute. Abraham's saying to God, hey, wait a minute. You might want. You're sounding like a hypocrite. You want to take care of the righteous, but you're going to destroy the whole city, even though there's righteous people there. Abraham is not challenging God. He's explaining that he knows that God isn't going to destroy. First of all, we need to understand this. He's concerned for his nephew. He knows Lot is down in Sodom, and he knows that Lot is a righteous person. And so he when he hears that Sodom is going to be destroyed, he has a concern. And so, peradventure, I've always thought that was a funny word. But what it means is that it's not even a Hebrew word, it's a Middle English word, and it just means possibly or perhaps. So he's saying, possibly, if there's 50 righteous people there, is it possible that you would save the city? He's actually asking him for His grace and for His mercy, is what he's doing. He's talking to God about His mercy and saying, if there are righteous people there, will you change your mind? Will you change your plans? And so, that's what he's saying in general. But in verse 23, he says, and he drew near. He stepped closer. He leaned in. Whatever he did, he shortened the distance between him and God and spoke more privately and intimately with Jesus. And keep in mind the visual picture of this. They're still standing there as they're leaving Abraham's, underneath the tree next to Abraham's tent. They're still standing, and Jesus and Abraham are having this conversation, and Jesus gives them this news. And now Abraham kind of leans in, and whatever that looks like, he shortens the distance between him and Christ because he wants to have this personal, kind of like when you're standing there, you've got maybe three of you or whatever, and you kind of lean into somebody and you talk a little softer, or maybe you whisper a little softer because you don't want anybody else to hear what you're saying. So he shortens the gap between him and the traveler, who is Jesus Christ. And he whispers into his ear, brother, they just keep coming. This is a good day in the Lord. We were talking about you. All right. So we need to understand this wording. And keep in mind this too. And it's funny because when you go to the New Testament, you see the same word. And what the word is used for in the original root word is used for is to describe you getting closer to God spiritually. When it says Abraham drew near, we say that he closed the gap between him and the traveler. He shortened the gap. He leaned in. He stepped closer, whatever that looks like. But that same word in describing what Abraham did is described for us when we draw near to God. When we're drawing nearer, when we're stepping closer, when we're closing the gap. I keep saying that because, you can be a Christian and have a very wide gap between you and the Lord. There's a lot of Christians who think that they have like the bat phone. They've got this red hotline to God, but they have their gap between them and God is very, very wide. In this particular instance, what we're and I use that because it's a very easy thing to picture. Okay, and you can, as that gap gets narrower and narrower, you're drawing closer to God. It's the same word. So when and here's the concept. We started off, even though we haven't gotten to it yet, we started off talking about how these three verses, you have to remember that Abraham had a concern. And I don't want to use the word symbolic, but if you compare this, when Abraham had his concern about Lot in Sodom, what did he do? He leaned in. He got closer. He closed the gap between him and Jesus Christ. Now, and if you want to compare that, here you have a concern. Today, in 2014, what's the first thing you do? Lean in. Close that gap. Have that personal conversation, just like Abraham did. Close the gap between you and God and get your reassurance. Because that's what is going on here. Abraham needs reassurance that God is not going to destroy Lot because Lot is righteous. And so there's an action taking place that we're supposed to emulate.
You could look at that with wide eyes or narrow eyes, in that when something happens bad to us or we have a great need to close that gap. But and it's funny because I was thinking about this morning and I thought about it a lot. Sometimes that gap needs to be narrowed just throughout the day.
Yeah.
Your gap gets wider throughout the day. Something happens and it makes you angry or whatever. You need to narrow that gap back throughout the day.
Me and Randy were talking as we spent a lot of time yesterday. When we talk about sin, okay, we're Christians and we sin, but okay, so maybe we don't go out and get drunk, and maybe we're not having adulterous affairs, and maybe we're not murdering somebody, maybe we're not doing the blatantly obvious, the capital offenses, maybe we're not like out there doing some big stuff, But remember that disobedience is a sin. You know, remember that, you know, you're being angry.
Yep.
It's okay to be angry as long as you don't sin. The problem is usually when we're angry, we sin. You know, we're angry and you lose control of yourself. You know, you lose control and you use the Lord's name in vain. You start cussing and swearing. You say hateful stuff to somebody else, whatever it is. I talk about emotions a lot at work, as anyone can imagine. And I'll say it until the day I die. I'll probably violate my own rule, but I still believe in the rule whether I violate it or not. And that's, you never, ever, ever make a decision when you're emotional. Ever. Don't ever do it. Ever. Because it's 9 times out of 10 it's going to be the wrong one. You're going to do the wrong thing. And I'm not saying I don't do it, because I do, you know. But that just makes me tell you from experience that when you're emotional, no matter what kind of emotion it is, somewhere in there our filters get a little askew. You know, we start looking at things a little more selfishly, with vengeance instead of logic. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what emotion it is. So, but here, you know, here Abraham, he's getting, you know, he's concerned about Lot. And
his nephew.
As his nephew, and he loves him, and you know, and his and Lot's family. So he's concerned about that. And here, see, these 3 passages say, these 3 verses say a lot. Do you really think that Abraham doesn't think that God is righteous? I mean, as we've been reading here lately, there's been a lot of things going on. You know, and ever since we read about the war and how God appeared to Abraham, and Abraham said, I believe, and he throws himself 100% into God, and he's following all of this stuff, and the conversations about how Abraham's going to be blessed, you know, are starting to come true now, and all this stuff. You know, I don't think that Abraham, at this moment when he's having this conversation, I've actually stopped and thought about this, because it's like, why would he ask this? We know God. We believe God will be righteous. So do I really think he's going to send a saved person to hell? No, I don't think that God's going to do that. And I'm pretty sure Abraham didn't think he was going to do that to his nephew. But we're human. And what Abraham needs here is some consoling. He needs some reassurance. You know, he needs to have his flesh satisfied. And so he goes and he asks a question that we all already know the answer to. God's not going to do that. So, that be far from thee to do after this manner. He represents it as this be unbecoming the divine majesty. You know, actually, have you ever had a conversation with somebody and you're talking out loud, but what you're really doing is talking to yourself?
Yeah.
You know, where you're saying stuff and you're kind of just working it through. This would be unbecoming of the divine majesty. I asked you again, do you think Abraham didn't know that? I mean, obviously he has to have his mind on his divine majesty to even bring it up. And he obviously knows what divine majesty is. And if you really know what divine majesty is, why would you ask that question? You know? But again, the things we do when we're in a way, when we need that, you know, reassurance or consoling from God. Sometimes, have you ever prayed for something and then, you know, later on you're like, why did I pray for that? You know, it's because in that moment there was something that you needed. There was something going on with you. And you say what you say, and I'm quite certain God's never offended, but it's just funny when you look back at yourself, you do a little introspection about something, you're like, you know, I know better than that, you know.
But that's God's job. That's
what we're supposed. I'm not saying we're not supposed to do it. Don't take me the wrong way. I'm explaining, well, this is what Abraham is doing here. Abraham's doing it because you got to get the picture. He's concerned.
Yeah.
He's just been laid on some heavy news. I mean, imagine God appears to you and says, hey, I'm taking out Maslin. Okay, so where's your mind going to be? How many of you have relatives here? You know, you're going to start thinking about stuff. I mean, he just got some news that shook him. You know, so, and you start scrambling sometime. Especially, you know, he's walking down the path. The other two have already left. They're already heading down there. This is not an open-ended thing. He's going down there to handle business now. You ever been put on the spot?
Yeah.
Yeah, you start scrambling sometimes for some
But it's
stuff.
also, brother, isn't it also our job to pray for those of our friends?
It is, but he's having a conversation with the Lord right now. And don't forget, we are now in the position where he knows he's talking to Christ. So you can consider this a prayer. I mean, he's talking to him face to face as he's in this traveler in the form of a man. We pray, even if you heard something right now that shook you to the core, and you go to your knees and you pray, are you not going to pray something similar? Even though right now when everything is fine and even, you know that the Lord is going to do his will and he's going to take care of things and he's going to be righteous about it. You know that already.
Yeah.
But that's the drawing nigh part. You got to go back to the first, 4 words. And Abraham drew near. That's the same word in the original text where it says that's what he wants you to do. Draw near when we have these times.
Yeah.
And this is an example. I'm trying to just give you the whole picture about what's going on here. Don't just read. These are only 3 verses that people just read right through and you don't get it. Stop and think about what God has just told Abraham. And how significant that is. Man, I'm going to lose my nephew. I'm going to lose my family. Put yourself in Abraham's shoes. We, like Billy says, we hit our knees and we start praying quickly. And then we get up, we start making some phone calls. Get out of town. But here he has God right in front of him, so he's having a conversation. And I'm going to tell you something, I wish I was there. I wish I had that. I'd like to have a conversation with God himself. I know I'm doing that with prayer, but he's having a conversation back and forth with God. I would love that. So he says, to slay the righteous with the wicked, which is true of eternal punishment, but not of temporal calamities. We have to understand it because we get into the whole, well, Mike, righteous people die in natural disasters. Yep, yeah, they sure do. But this isn't a natural disaster. Keep the two different. This isn't a meteor shower that's going to come down and just wipe out Sodom. This is punishment. This is condemnation. God is passing judgment on a city and he's destroying it directly because of sin. And in those instances, the righteous don't get punished with the wicked. We have gained eternal life. They have gained eternal death in hell. So, in that perspective, this is a different story. Okay? It's the same thing as the flood. The flood was not a natural disaster. The flood was a punishment. It was a consequence. And the only righteous person on the planet was saved. And the people in his house were saved because of his righteousness. So, the Bible, listen, when we become Christians, here's a side effect of being a Christian. You believe the Bible. You have to believe the Bible. And if you believe the Bible, then you believe everything that's in it, including these stories that we read about. These are now 2 stories where you now have evidence that God means what he says when he says, if you don't be obedient, I'm going to destroy you. And as a parent, as a creator, I'm quite certain he doesn't want to do that. Just like I would really not want to destroy my kids. I don't want to destroy my own children. I'm sure God doesn't want to destroy us. But he has made a statement. He has issued a command and he has an expectation. And just like our children, yes sir, that's subtle. I got it actually, go ahead.
The question is, will God destroy the righteous with the wicked? That's something to look at, isn't it? Huh?
No, he won't. Not on Judgment Day, he won't.
No.
Not on Judgment Day. But go ahead.
I was just thinking when you were talking there about the parent and him, the thing is you have to keep in mind, God can't do anything other than what he's going to do because he's God.
Yeah.
And because he's righteous, he has to do
Yeah.
what he's doing or he wouldn't be God.
Right.
Whereas with us,
Yeah.
it's different. So,
Yeah.
God really, I mean,
We can look at our children and we can say, hey, if you do this, this is the consequence. And then they do it and then we go back on our word. We can say it. We can change the consequence. We can do whatever we want. Because we don't claim to be God. If God does that, even though at doing that as a parent, we've now kind of put ourselves in a position to be liars. Because we said we were going to do something and now we're not doing it. So that's a lie. And because it is, that makes it impossible for God to do that. God can't lie. So he has already given 2 examples. We are now at 2 examples with the flood and with the destruction of these 5 cities where God has kind of exhibited that he means what he says. Not only does he mean it, but he will execute it. And so he says, I'm going to do this if you do that. And so they've done that, and they've done it to such a degree that there was only one righteous person there, Lot, or Noah. So therefore I will save you, but I'm destroying the rest of you. And so after Christ comes, what today is, okay, so here's my Bible. It's been recorded. I've instructed the hands of men to write these words down. I leave them for you with the instructions from my Son. Here's the deal. Be obedient or burn in hell. That's basic instruction. That's the basic Christendom. Be obedient or go to hell. And be obedient means follow the word. And for those who think that that means obey the 10 commandments, no. It means obey the word. And I'm biting from you. I'm setting you up. You shouldn't have told me what you were going to preach on. But it's the truth. Christ has given us instructions. Paul has given us instructions. God has allowed Paul's books to be put in the Bible. If you believe that Paul is a human man and so therefore I'm not going to listen to him, I'm only going to believe the red letter, then what you're saying is God has absolutely no control of what goes into his Bible. God is so powerful that he can hang the stars, the sun and the moon, but he cannot control what went into his word. So we might as well get over that real quick. Because he has total control and everything that's in his word is intended to be there.
The thing about it, when you think about everything that we've read that God did when it comes to the flood, when it comes to this, you've got righteous God, you've got loving God. Even though that statement is absolutely correct that you're going to be obedient or you're going to go to hell because he's long-suffering, he gives you a chance.
Yeah, we have a chance.
Yeah, those people in Sodom and Gomorrah, they had a chance. Those people when the ark was being built, they had a chance. But at some point in time, and for us,
there's a line.
For us, it's not the ark, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah, it's the end of your life or before Christ comes back.
Yeah.
You have the chance. He's long-suffering, but there's going to come a point where we'll all face that same exact scenario, a different way that it'll happen to us.
If you take what you're saying right now and you look at the building of the ark, Noah, as he's building this for over 100 years he built that thing,
120.
120, was ridiculed. And he was made fun of. And I'm sure there were people that were asking him questions. And I'm just as sure as he was walking around telling people why he was building it. Get right, I'm telling you, there's coming a day. And they probably, we talked about this when we studied that. They thought he was a nut. Just like people who think we're nuts. When we walk around and we say, hey, there's coming a day. And what Randy's saying is right. You know, I don't think they knew to the day when the flood was going to come. And I don't think that people knew in Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 cities that today it was going to rain hellfire and destroy the cities. They didn't know that was coming. Guess what? We don't know when it's coming either. But he had Noah spreading the word. He went down into Gomorrah and he was giving us opportunities to get right. Lot was there. You know, and he was righteous and he was trying to lead by example, which we'll get into in the next few verses. But, I mean, there was an opportunity for you to get right. But sin is so great and sin is so joyful. People don't want to give it up. Quite frankly, there's Christians that will sit there and defend why they do what they do. Well, that's not really what the Word says. Are you sure? Are you sure, or are you just making yourself feel better? Because that's what people want to do. That's what they're doing when they say, take that cross down. No crosses in school, no crosses in the government. It's not that they have anything about a cross. They just don't want to feel convicted all day long.
Yeah, that's it.
Get it, instead of me changing what I'm doing so I can be right, you take that down so I can feel good.
That's right.
So, you know, that's what that's about. So then he goes on, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Okay, so if during this conversation with these 3 travelers, there's ever a moment where we think that Abraham may or may not know who he's talking to, we now know that Abraham knows who he's talking to. Because the judge of the whole earth is who?
Jesus.
It's God, Jesus Christ. Okay? It's God. So now he knows, because he's saying to this man who's saying, I'm going to go down and destroy Sodom. Okay, so now he's addressing him knowing that he's God now. So there's no question, okay, that Abraham now knows that there's only one judge of the entire earth. Okay? And yet again, notice that it's in the form of a question. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?
Yeah.
So I ask you again. Do you think Abraham does not already know the answer to that? Can I ask every one of you? Do you think that the judge of the earth is going to do right on that day?
Sure he will.
You believe it's coming, so do you think that he's going to do right? And as a Christian, I'm thinking that everybody, if you're saved in this room, you should be saying, I absolutely believe that he's going to do right. And if you're saying that to yourself, then please go stand in front of the mirror and make sure you're doing right.
Amen.
Okay? Because if you believe he is a righteous God, a just God, and you believe he's going to do right on Judgment Day, then the most important thing for you to do is to make sure that you're right.
Yeah.
Has to be. You have to be. Otherwise, you're condemning yourself. And that's the big picture of this free will. Do you realize that it's not God that's sending you to hell? It's not God doing that. God has very clearly told every last one of us where he wants us to be. And he has very clearly told us how to get there. If we go to hell, it's by our own device. It's our own choice.
Yeah.
Because having knowledge, having been enlightened, we are making a choice. And that is to disobey God. Now that takes on a whole lot of different pictures. What that disobedience looks like. I'm talking the bare bones. We're being disobedient. And look at your children. You're a parent. And for the people who are new and coming, love to have you. But I cannot get away from comparing the way God deals with us, the way a parent deals with the children. I make that correlation all the time because it's no different. You have given instruction to your children. You have set an expectation. They know how to do what you want them to do, and they don't do it. Is there a consequence? Without question, there's a consequence. There should be a consequence. Now, I take into consideration there's a lot of parents that don't love their kids. I've seen them. I'm talking about a loving parent. I'm talking about a good parent doing things the right way. There ought to be a consequence when your child is disobedient. And I'm letting you know God's is going to discipline us. Hey, there's going to be stripes. When we get there and we hear, me and Randy were talking about this the other day too. I don't think this is going to be an interview where it's like, you believed in me, go ahead on. It's not going to be a second. We're going to be told about the things we've done.
Everything.
We're going to be reminded. We're going to have things laid out for us. We'll go to heaven. I'll go to heaven, but I'm going to hear it. And I'm going to sit there and say, yes, Lord, I did that. I have this coming.
Every one of us are going to be deemed unrighteous except the seed.
So, I mean, that's the way that's going to be. And so we're sitting here in 2014, some of us worse sinners than Abraham, saying that, I know my... So does Abraham know? He knows. He's pleading. This is his plea. This is him trying to get comfort. This is like the way we pray for our lost loved ones. We know that God can do whatever He wants, whenever He wants. You know, and if He wants somebody saved, He'll put people, things will work for His good. Period. It's going to work. But He gives us free will. And so Abraham knows and believes that God's going to do what He's going to do, but he wants Lot saved. And he can't go down and save Lot. Just like you can't go and save your lost loved ones. You can't do that. So therefore, he is pleading. He's trying to get this reassurance for God. That's what this is about. He is advocating for the righteous, not just Lot. And as the father of our faith, notice that he goes on, down Numbers 50 to 10. He is not just advocating for Lot, although Lot is on his mind. He's advocating for the righteous. Jesus Christ advocated for the righteous. He's our advocate. And we see here that God establishes that the righteous will not be destroyed with the wicked. Not then, and He's not going to do it now. We will be spared. To be spared is His mercy. That's what to be spared is. And so that's what Abraham is counting on. Is there any questions? Because we're going to go right to the end of the chapter now. Okay? Verses 26 through 33. And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, behold, now I have taken upon thee to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all of the city for the lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spake unto him yet again, and said, peradventure there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for the 40's sake. And he said unto him, O let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, peradventure that there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, O let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the 10's sake. And the Lord went his way, as soon as he had left communing with Abraham. And Abraham returned unto his place. So, what a humble, this is a humbling conversation. This is an example of a person who is humbling himself before God, because when he says, which am but ash, dust and ashes, sometimes we refer to ourselves, I am but a worm on this earth. I am low. I am nothing. Because you are God. Remember we talked about how the idiom in the Bible where God says that we're supposed to love Him so much that we hate our family members. He does not expect us to hate anybody. But what He is saying and declaring there is that you are to love me so much that the love that you have for me compared to the love that you have for your loved ones ought to make it seem like you don't love your loved ones. That's the great distance that should be between us. I should be that far above everybody else in your life. And when you are talking to somebody who is that great, and I'll give you, hey, let's look at the world today. Our young people would be in awe if a rock star walks through the door. They would be beside themselves. They wouldn't know what to do. They start screaming and running around like God walked in the door. Because that's how I would feel if God walked in the door.
Yeah.
It's about, we emulate the wrong things. And this is where, when it comes to separation, we don't separate ourselves enough because we worship the wrong things. We hold on to a lot of earthly stuff because we just can't let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it like, what kind of trap is it that when you put a nut into a hole and then they grab it and then they don't break, they can't get away because their hand is fat because they got the nut in their hand? Like, is that like a rabbit trap or a groundhog or a squirrel trap maybe?
Something like
There's
that.
a small hole and then their hands can fit in it and then you put a food in and they grab it and now they can't get their hand out.
Like a snare.
It's a snare, but they're too dumb to let go. If they let go, their hand would come back out. But because they want that nut,
Yeah.
now you're caught. Okay, difference between going to heaven and hell. Heaven, I can't have the nut. Hell, I'm reaching in, I'm grabbing the nut, now I'm not going to let it go. Again, that's your choice. Let the nut go, you go to heaven. It's a very narrow path because people can't make that decision. And what he's saying here, we talk about praying, brother. Did you ever get yourself into a position where sometimes you got to be careful about what you say when you're praying, and how you're saying it, because God's not a gambler, and He's not a negotiator. Prayer shouldn't be a negotiation. If Lord, if you send me a financial blessing that will get me out of debt, I promise I will go to church every Sunday. Okay, prayer is not a negotiation. God's like, well, now I'm really not sending you a financial blessing because you're going to go to church because it's in your heart. That's why you go to church, because you want to be there. Okay, he's having a conversation here where he's feeling like he might be offending God with these continuous retorts, so he's kind of, listen, he's letting the Lord know, I'm not trying to offend, I know where I'm at, and I'm underneath the sole of your sandal, that's where I'm at, I'm the dust, I'm nothing, so don't take this the wrong way. That's what he's saying. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to negotiate with you. I'm just trying to be comforted by you. He's looking for the comfort.
Yeah.
Okay? So, when he says stuff like, which am but dust and ashes, he's letting God know that he knows where his place is, which is another problem with us. A lot of us have absolutely no idea where our place is. And so sometimes we get our egos going where I don't want you to put me in my place. You don't have the authority to put me in my place. My place is where I decide that it is. I think that if you read the Bible, whether you're a child, a man, a woman, a husband, a wife, I think if you read the Bible, that God has very clearly given us our roles. All of us. He has given us each individual expectations, and it doesn't matter how you earthly think about it. It's about you, how you heavenly think about it. Amen?
Amen.
All right. So he's letting God know that he knows where his place is, okay? And that he has the high thoughts of God's divinity. So, and I know that we talked about this a long time ago when that sermon came out with Vodi Bachman. I'm sorry, I keep bringing him up, but that was one of the best sermons I have ever heard in my life. Remember this. When you walk around talking about how unhappy you are about anything, and that sermon, if you recall, was about marriage, how unhappy you were in your spouse. But if you meditate on that and you think about how unhappy you are with anything in your life, what you're telling God is that his blessings are not good enough. His action in your life is not good enough. Because you're unhappy and his job as God is to make you happy. And he's not doing his job. That's what you're saying. So, he's letting God know that this isn't, listen, I'm keeping these requests that I'm making of you in proper perspective. You are God and I am dirt. That's what he's saying. Okay? Adam starts at 50 and he ends at 10. Okay? He begs for the mercy. What if there's 50 and he gets thinking about what if there was 45? Okay, I don't want to limit this. Go ahead.
You read it as it's a request, but I read it as he's trying to understand.
Well, I think he's asking it for I believe, and it's all about how it's imprinted onto your heart. But I believe that he starts at 50 as a number, but what if there's only 45? So I want to make sure that he's not going to destroy them for 45 because he starts at 5 increments of 5, and then he goes to increments of 10. And he ends up at 10 if you listen to the commentators. If you read the biblical commentators, because he counts Lot's family members. And he believes that there's 10. And so he ends with 10 on purpose. That's a number that he throws out on purpose because he wants to make sure that Lot's family is taken care of. And so that's why he ends with 10. Everything else, we're reading the story, but what happens, have you ever set limits on something for yourself and your limit was a little high, and because you didn't plan for low, it just fell apart? Well, I should have planned for lower. I do that all the time. I overbid everything. When I buy food for events, you guys see how much food because I overdo it. I overshoot everything. But that's also I'd rather have too much than not enough. But at the same time, he's sitting here, he's talking about losing people's lives. I don't want to lose 45 because like he is pinning the Lord down to 50. You could just say it 1 would have ended the whole thing. But again, do we really think all that clearly when we've just been told this town is going to, these 5 cities are going to be destroyed? Don't forget that Abraham is not a spirit. He's human, just like you and me. And he's just been handed some significant news that people are going to die. And so the Lord went on his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and then Abraham returned to his place. His place, his tent, if you recall, we talked about, was in the plains of Mamre, and certainly waiting to observe and hear what would be the issue. Can you imagine? It's kind of like us sitting here waiting for, we've been told what's going to happen in days, and now we're waiting for it. He goes back to his tent, and now he's waiting to know what the end was, what the end result was, the anxiety that he must have been feeling. Because I don't know about you, but I feel I'm starting, the more and more I do stuff and the more I'm certain that the Lord, you know, is directing the path that I'm on to do certain things. And I feel the difficulty of doing it, because it's difficult. You'll never know how many times the world talks about television shows until you have decided not to watch TV anymore. Every time I turn around, somebody's like, "Did you see this? Did you see that? Did you watch this? You do this? You do that?" How many times do I have to tell you, brother, I don't have TV in my house? No, I didn't see this. But it's constant. And I never realized it before. But it's like our whole world revolves around the television set. You know? And I say that because it makes me, I have been feeling it a lot lately, Lord, just please make it today. Come back today. I want you to come back today. Because I don't want to hear this anymore. And there have been some things in the last week that news, if I get news, I get it because it's sent to my, you know, how you, like, AOL, America Online, and they had that news page that pops up first on your thing, and then, you know, I read that for news, just to let me know what's going on. The same thing with Yahoo has a homepage that flashes news, and then of course Facebook, people forward news about all kinds of stuff. We've got our government negotiating with terrorists now. All of a sudden we've changed our policy on the fact that we don't negotiate with terrorists. Meanwhile, other people are suffering in prisons in Mexico. We won't negotiate with them. And things are just falling apart. And it's just like, yeah, I'm ready to go home. We have 9 minutes before 11 o'clock, so I think before, and this is the last slide for chapter 18, so I think it's good to stop here. Next week we'll pick right up with brand new chapter 19. Any questions? Any comments? Go ahead, brother.
I just got one comment.
Go ahead.
Why do you think, well, it's kind of a question. He asked several times, "Oh Lord,
Who's
let
your
not
pastor, by the way?
the Lord be angry."
Mm-hmm.
He said that several times. It was like he thought that he was annoying God.
Yes.
That's what it seemed like to me. Is that
Yes.
the way it seemed?
Yes, because the conversation could be interpreted, like for instance, your daughter comes and asks you a question, you answer the question. And then 5 minutes later she comes back and asks you slightly different, same question, basically. You answer the question, third time. You're going to get frustrated?
Yeah.
As a human being, I'm
just
probably,
why-
you know what? I've already answered that question. You know? And so there's frustration. And again, also maybe the feeling that he's trying to negotiate with a non-negotiator. You know? And again, here's the thing. Keeping in perspective that if we say daddy-daughter conversation aggravating, let's change that to a Bill Williams and to a guitar player talking about music and the gospel music, and you take the greatest guitar player in gospel music ever, whoever that is sitting right here, you know, you might be a little starstruck or whatever, and you're starting to pick their brain, but you start to feel like you might be pushing your limits.
Yeah.
And he feels like he might be, whether he's offending God or just simply pushing the limits by having this conversation, which is, you know, he may have felt it was, you know, a petty. I'm sorry that I have to keep at. Sometimes I feel bad about going and asking somebody, you know,
Yeah.
for help, because he's kind of asking for help at the same time. He's asking for comfort and whatever, and the Lord's already answered it. He may have taken it himself as a lack of faith, because I'll tell you, when I pray, I've shared this with you before, I have these things where you ask for your daily blessings, but when I ask for the Lord for something that's specific, I won't ask again. I don't pray for the same thing twice. I personally, and this is just Mike, but I personally feel if I ask for the same things twice, then I don't believe he heard my other prayer. And I believe God hears my prayers. You know? And do I think that asking it twice is going to change his mind? Either he has it in his mind, he's going to answer my prayer, or he's not. So that's just me. You know? But So if I did, I would apologize for feeling like maybe giving him the impression that I don't believe him. You know, because I do believe him. So, you know, there's all kinds of, but I think that he didn't want the Lord to get angry, and I don't think the Lord was, but I think he wanted to make certain of it.
I just wanted to make sure that was the general consensus. That's
Right.
the way I felt about it too.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay.
11 o'clock, we'll start service.
Huh? 11 o'clock, yeah.
$12.
You know you did close. I'm just having fun. I'm just having fun with it.
I haven't seen that. Thank you. I forgot about that.
Hey, brother.
Good to see you. Oh, that's Jamie.
You,
And the two girls, they're
wanna
the
try to do some thinking next Saturday, maybe?
Yeah, we'll have to send her away. You will.
Yeah. Some people rent semis, you know?
Yeah, you might have to do that.
Oh, I bet you that's expensive.
I don't know, just one way. You're not coming back.
Right. Yeah, truck's coming back, so.
By somebody else.
Yeah, hopefully they're, yeah, right, like a car rental. Like,
Yeah.
rent it to there, somebody else will bring it back.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
How you feeling? Yeah, I don't.
Hey, Mayor. You better catch up to me.
No, I think it's faster. You're gonna have to do some catching up with me.
Did you learn about Jonah? Yeah.
We missed. We didn't count that.
We get rid of that.
No. Anna?
Hey, brother.
That's about all I can do. Oh, my goodness. Oh, man. That's a great piece.
Hi, sweetie.
I don't think I washed my face. How are you? I don't think I watched the list for a week. Yep.
You never said I'm not.
Might not be.